The Unlikely Pack. Chapter 1. The Maintenance Guy and the Void. The air in the deepest sub-level of Zazura Station didn't just feel cold, it felt heavy, as if the oxygen itself was afraid to move. Caleb Miller adjusted the strap of his heavy tool bag, the rhythmic clink of his wrenches the only sound in the sterile white corridor. Beside him, Captain Vrax and 4 Krix security guards skittered on their spindly insectoid legs, their translucent wings buzzing with a high-pitched, frantic energy. They were encased in the finest ceramic plate armor the Galactic Union could buy, clutching plasma rifles with all 4 of their trembling hands. Caleb, by contrast, wore a faded orange Soltech jumpsuit with a grease stain on the thigh that looked suspiciously like a map of Australia.
Human, Miller, you are certain about this?
Vrax asked, his mandibles clicking together in a series of sharp, nervous pops. The alien captain stopped 10 feet short of the massive, reinforced blast door that led to Sector 0.
It's just a routine maintenance check, Captain. The life support sensors in the primary cell are reading a 15% drop in atmospheric pressure. If I don't go in there and recalibrate the seals, your galaxy ender is going to suffocate. And I'm pretty sure a dead Void-Stalker is even worse for your career than a live one.
Caleb replied, his voice calm and gravelly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small dented tin, popping a piece of synth tobacco into his cheek. He looked at the guards who were practically backing away from the door.
It is not the pressure we fear. It is the entity. It has not fed me in 3 cycles.
Vrax chattered, his 4 yellow eyes blinking in an unsynchronized pattern of pure terror.
Well, that's why I brought the snacks,
Caleb said, gesturing to the heavy plastic bucket in his left hand. It was filled with dense black cubes of carbon silicate, the equivalent of a high-calorie protein bar for something that lived on the edge of a black hole. Caleb stepped up to the control panel, his boots thumping solidly against the metal floor.
Authorization required. Warning. Beyond this point lies a Class 10 Apex entity. Survival probability 0.03%.
The station AI announced, its voice smooth, clinical, and entirely unconcerned with Caleb's impending mortality.
Miller, Caleb. Maintenance ID 4-492. Override code. Hold my beer.
He muttered, punching in the sequence. The massive gears behind the door groaned, a sound like a mountain being ground to dust. As the seal broke, a puff of freezing ozone-scented air billowed out. The Krix guards didn't wait. They scrambled backward, their rifles raised, their wings a blur of panic. Caleb didn't look back. He stepped into the darkness of Sector 0. The containment chamber was a cathedral of shadow. High-frequency containment fields hummed in the dark, casting a faint, sickly violet glow against the obsidian-tiled walls. In the center of the room was a massive cage of pure energy, but as Caleb's eyes adjusted, he realized the cage was empty. His heart hammered against his ribs, not with the paralyzing fear of the Krix, but with the focused adrenaline of a man who knew he was being watched. He felt a prickle on the back of his neck, the sensation of 1,000 needles pressing against his skin. Something moved in the rafters. It wasn't a sound, but a shift in the darkness itself.
Hey there, big guy. Sorry I'm late. The elevators on this station are a joke.
Caleb whispered, his voice echoing in the vast, hollow space. He set the bucket of carbon blocks down with a dull thud and reached into his tool belt, pulling out a heavy, industrial-grade brush with stiff nylon bristles. From the ceiling, a shape descended. It didn't fall, it uncoiled like smoke. The Shrowd landed silently on 6 multi-jointed legs, its body a terrifying masterpiece of evolution. It was 15 feet of shifting, liquid shadow held together by interlocking plates of what looked like polished black glass. 3 glowing violet eyes opened on its featureless head, pulsing in time with a low subsonic thrum that Caleb felt in his very marrow. It lowered its head, its obsidian face inches from Caleb's chest. The human could smell it now, the scent of cold metal and ancient dust.
Easy, easy. I'm just the janitor. You look like you've had a rough week,
Caleb said softly, extending his hand. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't reach for a shield. He reached out and placed his bare, calloused palm directly onto the Shroud's cold, vibrating snout. The creature froze. In the observation booth above, Caleb knew the Krix were probably fainting. To them, this was a death sentence. To Caleb, the creature felt tight. Its plates were vibrating with an agitated frequency, and he could see tiny, translucent parasites, void mites, scurrying in the crevices of its armor. The Shrowd let out a hiss, a sound like pressurized steam escaping a valve, and its tail lashed out, shattering a nearby reinforced glass light fixture.
Yeah, I know. Those mites are a pain in the neck, aren't they? Literally.
Caleb grunted, undeterred by the display of power. He picked up the brush and the sonic welder.
Sit or stand. Just stay still. If I'm gonna fix this, you gotta let me in,
he commanded, his voice firm but kind. To the shock of anyone watching, the galaxy's most feared predator didn't tear him apart. It tilted its head, its 3 violet eyes narrowing as it watched the small, strange primate. Slowly, it lowered its massive body to the floor, the obsidian plates clattering like a deck of iron cards. Caleb stepped closer, leaning his body against the creature's cold flank, and began to work. He commanded, his voice firm but kind. To the shock of anyone watching, the galaxy's most feared predator didn't tear him apart. It tilted its head, its 3 violet eyes narrowing as it watched the small, strange primate. Slowly, it lowered its massive body to the floor, the obsidian plates clattering like a deck of iron cards. Caleb stepped closer, leaning his body against the creature's cold flank, and began to work. Chapter 2. The 7-Year Itch. The sonic welder hummed in Caleb's hand, a low, steady thrum that vibrated through his bones. To any other species in the known galaxy, what he was doing was an act of clinical insanity. He was standing less than 6 inches away from a Void-Stalker, a creature capable of turning a dreadnought into scrap metal in minutes. But as Caleb looked at the creature, he didn't see a monster. He saw a patient. Under the intense violet light of the containment field, he could see the void mites clearly now. They were translucent, crystalline parasites that lived by leaching the kinetic energy directly from the Shroud's armor plates. They were burrowed deep into the soft, shimmering connective tissue between the obsidian scales, glowing with a sickly, stolen light.
Warning. Unauthorized maintenance procedure. Detected. Biometric sensors indicate extreme proximity to predatory entity. Caleb Miller, cease all activity and retreat to the airlock immediately.
The station AI VE Ray boomed from the overhead speakers. The voice was cold and insistent, followed by the shrill whine of an alarm that set Caleb's teeth on edge.
Not now, VE Ray. I'm busy. If I leave now, this big guy is going to go into a localized gravity collapse just to stop the itching. You want a black hole in your basement? No? Then shut up and let me work.
Caleb muttered, his eyes focused on a particularly large cluster of mites near the Shroud's secondary shoulder joint. He adjusted the frequency on his welder. He wasn't using it to weld. He'd tuned the ultrasonic pulse to a specific resonance that would shatter the crystalline structure of the parasites without harming the host. The Shrowd's massive tail swept across the floor, missing Caleb's ankles by a hair's breadth. The sound was like a whip cracking in a vacuum. Caleb didn't flinch. He knew the tail wasn't an attack. It was a reflex. The human brain was a strange thing, he thought to himself. Thousands of years of evolution on a death world like Earth had given his ancestors the ability to look at a wolf and see a friend, or look at a horse and see a partner. Now, deep in space, Caleb was doing it again. He felt a strange, primal pull toward the beast. It was lonely, it was in pain, and it was, in its own terrifying way, asking for help.
Miller, you are breaking protocol subsection 9. The security drones will be activated.
Captain Vrax's voice crackled over the intercom, his tone somewhere between a plea and a hysterical scream. In the observation window above, Caleb could see the Krix captain's 4 hands pressed against the glass, his mandibles working furiously.
Send 'em in, Vrax. But the moment those drones start shooting lasers, they're gonna feed this thing exactly what it needs to break that energy shield. You really want to give a hungry predator a high-energy snack.
Caleb shouted back, not even looking up. He pressed the tip of the sonic tool against a gap in the obsidian plates. A sharp ping echoed through the room as the first cluster of mites turned to dust. The Shrowd let out a sudden, piercing shriek. It reared up on its hind legs, its massive shadow engulfing Caleb entirely. For a second, the human stood in total darkness, the only thing visible being the 3 glowing violet eyes staring down at him. The creature's claws, each the size of a harvesting scythe, hovered inches above his head. Caleb's heart skipped a beat, his breath hitching in his throat. He felt the sheer, raw power of the entity. It could crush him into a red smear without even trying. But he stayed still. He kept his hands visible, palm up, holding the tool like an offering.
Easy, easy. I know it hurts. It's like pulling a splinter, big guy. Just give me a second.
He whispered, his voice remarkably steady despite the sweat trickling down his spine. The Shrowd leaned down, its obsidian nose touching Caleb's forehead. The cold was intense, like standing next to an open freezer door in the middle of winter. The creature sniffed, a long, slow intake of air that seemed to pull the very warmth out of Caleb's lungs. Then, slowly, it settled back down. It let out a soft, rhythmic chuffing sound. Caleb exhaled a breath he didn't know he was holding and went back to work. For the next hour, the only sounds in the containment wing were the ping of shattering mites and Caleb's low, melodic humming. He hummed an old folk song his grandfather used to sing, something about a valley and a river. The Shrowd seemed to vibrate in time with the tune. As the last of the parasites were cleared away, the creature's posture changed. The tension that had defined its every movement for cycles vanished. It stretched, its 6 legs extending until its claws scraped the far walls of the cell. Then it happened. A sound began to build in the room. It wasn't high-pitched like the Krix's wings or clinical like the AI. It was a deep, low-frequency rumble that started in the Shrowd's chest and radiated outward. The floor began to tremble. In the observation booth, a glass carafe shattered. The Krix guards fell to their knees, covering their ear slits in agony.
Critical vibration alert. Structural integrity at 80%. Predatory entity is producing an unknown acoustic phenomenon.
VERA announced, her voice flickering with digital static. Caleb, however, didn't cover his ears. He started laughing, a bright, genuine sound that cut through the oppressive atmosphere of the station. He leaned back against the Shrowd's flank, feeling the massive, rhythmic pulses of the creature's body.
It's not a weapon, Vrax. He's purring. Can't you hear it? He's happy.
He yelled toward the ceiling. The Shrowd turned its head, its 3 eyes glowing with a soft, steady violet light. It reached out with its long, whip-like tail and gently, almost delicately, coiled the tip around Caleb's waist. It wasn't a grip. It was a touch, a bond. Caleb patted the cold metal of the tail, a small smile playing on his lips.
See, I told you, everybody needs a friend, even a god of the void,
he said quietly. But the moment of peace was shattered. A massive explosion rocked the station, the floor tilting violently to the left. The lights flickered and died, plunging the room into a deep, terrifying crimson of emergency power. Caleb felt the Shroud's muscles tighten instantly, the purr turning into a low, murderous snarl.
Attack! We are under attack. The Iron Vanguard. They have breached the hull.
Vrax's voice screamed over the comms, followed by the unmistakable sound of plasma fire and the dying shrieks of Krix guards. Chapter 3. Dead Space. The silence that followed the explosion was worse than the noise. It was a thick, suffocating vacuum that seemed to swallow the screams of the dying station. Caleb lay flat on the metal floor, his ears ringing with a high-pitched whine that wouldn't quit. The air was suddenly sharp with the smell of ionized copper and burnt silicone. He groaned, pushing himself up on shaking hands. The floor was tilted at a nauseating 15-degree angle, and the only light came from the flickering dim red glow of the emergency strips and the pulsing violet heartbeat of the Shroud.
Critical system. Failure. Main power. Offline. Containment fields. At 0%.
VERA's voice was a distorted, mechanical croak, clicking through the speakers like a dying insect. Caleb froze. He looked toward the center of the room. The shimmering wall of energy that had held the Shrowd in place for 3 centuries was gone. There was no hum, no barrier, nothing between him and the most dangerous predator in the known universe, but 30 feet of cold air. The Shrowd stood in the center of its cell, its 6 legs tensed, its obsidian plates flared out like the hackles of a territorial dog. Its 3 eyes were no longer soft. They burned like dying stars in the gloom.
Vrax, do you copy? What's the status on the security deck?
Caleb whispered, tapping his comms link. There was a burst of static, then a frantic, wet chittering sound.
They are here, the Vanguard. They used an imp. The shields are down. We are evacuating to the life pods. Forgive me, Miller.
Vrax's voice was hysterical, punctuated by the roar of an explosion and the sound of a heavy door slamming shut. Then the line went dead.
Cowardly little bug.
Caleb spat, wiping a smear of blood from his forehead. He realized with a sinking gut that he was the only living thing left in this wing of the station. Well, the only sentient living thing. He looked back at the Shrowd. The creature hadn't moved. It was watching him, its head tilted, its massive body vibrating with a low, predatory growl that made Caleb's teeth ache. He knew what a Void-Stalker was supposed to do the moment it was free. It was supposed to feed, and Caleb was the only source of kinetic energy. The heat of his blood, the beat of his heart, in the room. He felt the cold fear rising in his throat, a primal instinct screaming at him to run. But he knew running was useless. A human couldn't outrun a shadow. He forced his breathing to slow down. He reached into his tool bag, his fingers brushing against the cold steel of a manual override wrench.
Look, big guy, it's just you and me now. Your landlord's just skipped out on the bill,
he said, his voice surprisingly steady in the dark. He didn't stand up. He stayed on his knees, showing the creature he wasn't a threat. The Shrowd took a step forward, then another. Its claws clicked rhythmically against the floor, a sound like a clock ticking toward midnight. It stopped just a foot away from Caleb. Its shadow fell over him, darker than the darkness around them. Caleb could feel the vacuum-like pull of the creature's hide, the way it seemed to drink the light and warmth from the air. The Shrowd leaned down, its obsidian snout inches from Caleb's neck. One swipe of its claws would sever his head. One snap of its jaws, if it even had jaws under that glass mask, would crush his ribs. Caleb closed his eyes and waited. He thought of Earth. He thought of the smell of rain on hot asphalt and the sound of wind in the trees, things this creature had never known. Instead of a killing blow, he felt something cold and smooth press against his cheek. It was the Shrowd's snout. The creature wasn't biting. It was nuzzling him. The low growl shifted back into that deep, structural rumble, the purr. It remembered the brush. It remembered the song. It remembered the human who didn't scream.
Good boy. Good boy.
Caleb exhaled, a ragged laugh escaping his lips. He reached up and gripped the edge of one of the Shrowd's obsidian plates. It felt like polished granite, vibrating with hidden energy. The heavy thud of mag boots echoed from the corridor outside. It wasn't the frantic skittering of the Krix. It was the heavy, rhythmic stomp of trained soldiers. Caleb heard the hiss of a torch cutting through the emergency bulkhead door. The Iron Vanguard.
We've got company, buddy, and they aren't here to give us treats.
Caleb whispered. He stood up, using the Shrowd's massive leg for support. He grabbed his heavy industrial wrench, its weight a comforting presence in his hand. It was a primitive tool against plasma rifles, but it was all he had. The bulkhead door at the end of the hall groaned, the metal glowing white-hot as a thermal charge detonated. With a deafening clang, the door fell inward. Smoke and steam billowed into the room, illuminated by the harsh blue beams of tactical flashlights. 4 armored figures stepped through the gap, their heavy rifles raised. They wore the jagged, crimson armor of the Iron Vanguard, their helmets featureless and cruel.
Target acquired. The human is still alive. Where is the entity?
One of the mercenaries barked, his voice distorted by a helmet-integrated Vox unit. He swept his light across the room, the beam cutting through the smoke. Caleb stepped into the light, squinting against the glare. He held the wrench loosely at his side.
You guys picked a really bad day to break into my office,
Caleb said, a grim smile touching his lips.
Shut up, primitive. Move aside or be vaporized. We're here for the weapon.
The mercenary sneered, stepping forward. He aimed his plasma rifle directly at Caleb's chest.
That's the thing about you guys. You keep calling him a weapon.
Caleb said, leaning his head back toward the darkness behind him.
But he's not a weapon. He's my pack. And humans are very, very protective of their pack.
From the shadows behind Caleb, 3 glowing violet eyes snapped open. A low, bone-chilling snarl filled the room, and the air temperature dropped 20 degrees in a single second. The mercenaries froze, their flashlights shaking as they finally saw the 15-foot god of the void rising up behind the small, tired-looking human. The Shrowd didn't wait for them to fire. It vanished into a blur of obsidian and shadow. Chapter 4. The Shadow's Mercy. The first plasma bolt was a streak of blinding turquoise that hissed through the air, aimed squarely at Caleb's chest. The heat was a physical slap, the smell of ozone instantly overwhelming. But the bolt never reached him. A wall of shifting obsidian materialized in front of Caleb, a solid barrier of shadow that didn't just block the energy. It drank it. The plasma hit the Shrowd's plates with a muffled thump. The violet light in the creature's eyes flared brighter, and its body surged with a new, terrifying vitality.
Open fire, flank it, use the kinetic dampeners.
The mercenary leader screamed, his voice cracking with the sudden realization that they weren't hunting a captive animal. They were fighting a god that had just been fed. The room exploded into a chaotic symphony of light and violence. The mercenaries, 3 of them now, fanned out in a tactical diamond formation, their heavy rifles spitting continuous streams of superheated gas. Caleb dived behind a heavy carbon storage crate, his heart thudding against his ribs like a trapped bird. He watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the Shrowd moved. It didn't run, it simply ceased to be in one spot and appeared in another. It was a blur of darkness that seemed to bypass the laws of physics, moving through the mercenaries' line of fire as if the bullets were mere suggestions. One mercenary, a towering brute in heavy red armor, let out a gurgling cry as a shadow-wrapped claw swiped through his chest plate like it was made of parchment. The Shrowd didn't stop to eat. It didn't pause to savor the kill. It moved with a cold, surgical precision, always keeping its massive body between the remaining gunmen and the crate where Caleb was hiding.
To your left, buddy. 10 o'clock.
Caleb shouted, pointing toward a mercenary who was trying to crawl behind a power conduit. He knew the Shrowd didn't understand the words, but he felt the creature's consciousness ripple in response to his voice. The Shroud's tail lashed out, a whip of obsidian that shattered the conduit and the mercenary behind it in a single, thunderous strike.
Stasis charge. Throw the stasis charge.
The last standing pirate yelled, his hands shaking as he pulled a heavy, glowing cylinder from his belt. He slammed it onto the floor. A sphere of shimmering blue light expanded instantly, a high-gravity stasis field designed to lock molecular movement. The Shrowd, caught in the center of the blast, let out a low, agonizing moan. Its plates began to grind against each other, the violet light in its eyes flickering as the field tried to freeze its very atoms. It was pinned, its 6 legs straining against the invisible weight of 1,000 suns.
Got you, you filthy void spawn. Now, give me the human.
The pirate sneered, stepping forward. He ignored the Shrowd, thinking it was neutralized, and aimed his rifle at the crate where Caleb was crouching. Caleb didn't think. He didn't have time to be a technician or a civilian. He felt a hot, bubbling rage, the ancient protective fury of a pack member seeing his kin in pain. He gripped the heavy industrial wrench in his right hand. It was 2 feet of solid, unrefined steel, heavy enough to crack a hull. He lunged out from behind the crate, his boots sliding on the blood-slicked floor.
Hey, asshole!
Caleb roared. The pirate started to turn, his rifle swinging around, but Caleb was already there. He didn't use a laser. He didn't use a shield. He swung the wrench with every ounce of strength in his human frame, fueled by the adrenaline of a Death World survivor. The steel met the pirate's helmet with a sickening crunch. The visor shattered and the mercenary spun away, his rifle firing uselessly into the ceiling. Caleb didn't stop, so he scrambled toward the stasis generator, a humming, high-tech piece of equipment anchored to the floor by magnetic locks. The Krix would have tried to hack it. A scientist would have tried to stabilize it. Caleb Miller, a human engineer, raised his wrench and brought it down on the glass emitter with the force of a sledgehammer. Smash. The glass shattered. Smash. The internal circuitry sparked and died. Smash. The blue light flickered and vanished. The pressure in the room equalized with a violent pop. The Shrowd fell forward, its massive claws digging into the metal floor as it recovered its breath. It looked up at Caleb, its 3 eyes wide and pulsing with a deep, resonant violet. For a long moment, man and monster just stared at each other amidst the wreckage and the smoke. The Shrowd leaned its head down, the obsidian snout gently bumping against Caleb's chest, right over his racing heart. It was a gesture of profound gratitude.
Yeah, I got you. We're even now.
Caleb whispered, leaning his forehead against the creature's cold mask. He felt the purr return, softer now, but deeper. But the moment was interrupted by a low-frequency hum vibrating through the station's remaining hull.
External sensors. Detect. Galactic Union. Cleanup fleet. 7 dreadnoughts. Positioning. 4. Orbital bombardment. Target. Zerzura Station. Estimated time to impact. 6 minutes.
Viray's voice crackled through a broken speaker nearby.
Damn it. They aren't coming to rescue us. They're coming to bury the evidence,
Caleb said, his jaw tightening. He looked at the Shrowd.
We need to get to the observation deck. We need a big enough transmitter to tell them to stop. And we're gonna need to do it before they turn this rock into stardust.
The Shrowd let out a soft chuff, its tail coiling around Caleb's waist. Before he could react, the creature lifted him off his feet, swinging him onto its broad, armored back. Caleb gripped the edges of the obsidian plates, his fingers finding the familiar grooves he had cleaned only an hour ago.
Hold on, Miller. This is going to be a fast ride.
Huh, he muttered to himself. With a surge of power that cracked the floorboards, the Shrowd leaped toward the ceiling, crawling through the darkness of the maintenance shafts at a speed no human could ever match. They weren't just a man and a monster anymore. They were a pack. And the galaxy was about to see what happens when you try to hunt one of their own. Chapter 5. Pack Sovereignty. The observation deck of Zazura Station was a silent, glass-domed cathedral that looked out into the infinite black of the galactic rim. Usually it was a place of sterile beauty, but now it was a tomb. The air was thin, leaking slowly through micro-fractures in the hull, and the floor was littered with the abandoned tablets and half-drunk nutrient pouches of the Krix who had fled. Caleb Miller slid off the Shrowd's back, his boots hitting the carpeted floor with a soft, muffled sound. He was exhausted, his jumpsuit torn and soaked with a mixture of his own sweat and the blue ichor of the mercenaries.
Stay back a bit, buddy. If they see you jumping at the glass, they're definitely going to push the delete button,
Caleb said, his voice a raspy whisper. He limped toward the primary communication console, a massive semicircular desk that overlooked the void. Outside the reinforced transparent steel, the view was terrifying. 7 galactic Union dreadnoughts, massive spear-shaped vessels of gleaming white and gold, were arranged in a perfect geometric kill grid. Their ventral cannons were beginning to glow with a sickly, pale green light. It was the glow of anti-matter glassing beams, weapons designed to strip the atmosphere from a planet and turn its surface into a marble of molten slag. They weren't here to rescue a technician. They were here to make sure the Shrowd never left this sector.
Emergency transmitter. Offline. Core array. Damaged by EMP interference. Manual signal. Required.
VRA's voice was barely a ghost in the speakers now, flickering like a candle in a gale.
Of course it's manual. It's always manual.
Caleb grunted, kneeling under the console. He ripped away a plastic panel, exposing a rat's nest of fiber-optic cables and glowing data slugs. His hands were shaking, but his mind was clear. This was what humans did. When the high-tech, elegant systems of the galaxy failed, humans reached into the guts of the machine and forced it to work. He pulled a soldering iron from his belt and a spare coil of copper wire. The Shrowd approached the glass. It didn't roar, it didn't lash its tail, it simply stood there, its 3 violet eyes fixed on the fleet outside. It seemed to understand the threat. It looked back at Caleb, then back at the ships, its obsidian plates vibrating with a low, mournful hum. It was a sound of resignation. The creature knew it was a target.
Hey, look at me,
Caleb barked, snapping his fingers. The Shrowd turned its head.
Nobody is dying today. Not on my watch. I didn't spend an hour scrubbing those mites off you just to let some admiral turn us into a sun flare. Now give me some help. See that high-gain pillar over there? I need you to act as a ground. Put your tail on that copper contact.
Caleb commanded. The Shrowd hesitated for a fraction of a second, then moved. It coiled its massive obsidian tail around the base of the transmitter pillar. The creature was a living battery of kinetic and void energy. As its tail touched the metal, the console in front of Caleb erupted in a shower of sparks.
Signal restored. Broadcasting on. All frequencies.
Caleb grabbed the master headset and slammed it over his ears. He didn't wait for a handshake protocol. He didn't use a formal greeting.
This is Caleb Miller, Chief Maintenance Engineer of Zazura Station. I am the only human survivor on board. If you fire those beams, you are committing a war crime against the Sol Federation. Do you copy, Union fleet, stand down.
He roared into the mic. For a long, agonizing minute, there was only static. Then a holographic display flickered to life in the center of the deck. A tall, slender alien with iridescent skin and 4 silver eyes appeared. He wore the high-collared uniform of a Union Grand Admiral.
Engineer Miller, we scanned the station. There are no signs of life, except for the entity. Our instruments show the Void-Stalker is loose. It has consumed the security force. You are beyond saving.
The Admiral said, his voice cold and filled with a tragic sort of certainty.
Look at your feed, Admiral. Open your damn eyes.
Ah, Caleb shouted. He stepped away from the console and walked toward the center of the deck, right into the middle of the holographic field. He stood next to the Shrowd. The Admiral's silver eyes widened. In his long life, he had seen many things, but he had never seen a Void-Stalker, a creature described in ancient texts as the Eater of Stars, standing perfectly still while a human leaned against its side. Caleb reached up and patted the Shrowd's massive shoulder. The creature lowered its head, its 3 violet eyes pulsing softly as it rested its glass snout on Caleb's shoulder, right next to the human's neck.
It is not killing you. Why is it not tearing you apart?
The Admiral stammered, his composure shattering.
Because I'm the only one who bothered to ask why it was screaming. You treated it like a bomb, so it acted like one. I treated it like a pack mate. And in case you haven't studied human history, Admiral, we don't leave our pack behind.
Caleb's voice was steady, hard as the obsidian plates beside him.
You have 30 seconds to power down those weapons, or I'll have my friend here jump to your flagship and show you exactly how much kinetic energy he's stored up from those plasma bolts your pirates fired at us.
The silence on the bridge of the flagship must have been absolute. Caleb watched the green glow of the glassing beams. 10 seconds. 15. The Shrowd let out a low, warning snarl that vibrated through the transmitter and directly into the Admiral's ears. At 25 seconds, the green light faded. The dreadnoughts began to back away, their formation breaking.
We will send a transport. But understand, Miller, the galaxy will never be the same. You have brought a monster into the fold.
The Admiral said, his image flickering as the signal weakened.
He's not a monster. He's a Miller now, and we're going home.
Caleb said, switching off the comms. He slumped against the Shrowd's leg, the adrenaline finally leaving his system. He felt the creature's tail wrap gently around him, a warm, protective weight in the cold air of the station. Humans were often called the weakest of the galactic species. They didn't have wings or chitinous armor, or the ability to see in the dark. But as the rescue shuttle eventually docked, the galaxy learned a terrifying and beautiful truth. A human's greatest weapon isn't a gun or a ship. It's the ability to find a soul in the heart of a nightmare. Because once a human decides you belong to them, not even the void of space can stand in their way.